After 16 years of marriage, I caught my wife cheating on me with her boss in our living room when I returned from work earlier than expected. She said, "Why are you back early? Why didn't you call before coming?" I was shocked and angry at the same time. So I took action, and everyone immediately regretted it. I will tell you everything. First, let me quickly thank you for your continuous support. This means a lot to us. If you enjoy the stories we share, kindly subscribe to this channel. It will be great if you can leave a comment on which city you are watching from. We might just give you a shout out in our next story. Today's special shout out goes to Gina Ray from Florida. We are glad you enjoy our stories. Now let's go deeper into the story. I never thought a man could remember the exact scent of betrayal, but for me, it was lavender and lemon wax, what my wife always used to clean the floors. It hit me the second I pushed open the front door. That, and a strange kind of stillness. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. It's tense, expectant, like a held breath waiting to become a scream. The clock in the hallway said 4:38 p.m. I was home early. Just one of those rare days where the office shut down early after a quarterly review. I had flowers in one hand, takeout in the other, and not the faintest clue that my entire marriage was about to end in that moment. I didn't hear them at first. I thought maybe she was upstairs with her headphones in, or maybe taking one of those long bubble baths she always claimed helped her reset after a tough day at work. The scent of fresh lavender should have been comforting. It usually was. But there was something off about it that afternoon. Something too strong, like it had been used to cover something else. Something wrong. I set the flowers down on the hallway table, still wrapped in cheap cellophane, and called out, "Babe?" No answer. I started walking toward the living room. And that's when I heard a noise I hadn't heard in years. My wife laughing in that low, flirtatious way that used to be reserved for me. The moment I turned the corner, I swear, time did something unnatural. It slowed, like in those old war movies where the hero watches the bullet coming straight at him, but can't move out of the way. She was there, my wife of 16 years, straddling a man on our living room couch. Her blouse was unbuttoned halfway. Her heels kicked off on the rug I'd bought her for our anniversary. She didn't scream. She didn't jump off him. She didn't even flinch. She looked up at me with mild irritation, like I'd knocked on the bathroom door while she was busy. "Why are you back early?" she said. "Why didn't you call before coming?" I didn't even respond at first. I couldn't. My mouth went dry, my fingers clenched so hard around the takeout bag it split at the bottom and spilled across the hardwood floor. Her boss, because that's who he was, I recognized him from the holiday parties, had the decency to at least look embarrassed. He stood, tried to stammer something like, "I didn't know," but I didn't let him finish. I pointed at the door and said, "Out." Just one word, but the force behind it must have hit something primal, because he grabbed his jacket and stumbled out like a coward. She stayed seated, legs crossed like she still had dignity, and said, "You're overreacting." That was the moment I stopped loving her. Fully, completely, irrevocably. It's wild how fast your body shifts when your heart breaks. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even cry. I went cold. I told her to get out too. Not just out of the living room, but out of the house. Pack what you need. You're not sleeping here tonight. Or ever again. Her jaw dropped, like the idea of consequences had never even crossed her mind. She kept trying to twist it, saying things like, "You've been distant," or "We've been stuck in a routine," like any of that justified what I'd just seen. Like routine ever gave her permission to dismantle our family in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon. She tried to act wounded, kept asking, "Where am I supposed to go?" As if I'd care after what she pulled. I reminded her she had somewhere. Maybe her boss's place, though I figured his wife might have a few things to say about that. Eventually, she left, slamming the door behind her like she was the wronged one. I stood alone in the same room where we used to celebrate birthdays and holidays, staring at the mess she left behind. The flowers still sat untouched on the hallway table. I picked them up and threw them straight in the trash. Then I poured myself a drink, sat in the same spot where she'd been with him, and let the weight of 16 years come crashing down on me. I didn't sleep that night. I tried. God knows I tried. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. How blank it had been, how casual. It was like she'd been living a different life all this time, one where I didn't even exist except for when she needed something. I went through our photos on my phone, not because I wanted to remember the good times, but because I needed proof that they even existed. I kept asking myself, was it always fake? Or did something shift along the way? Some slow erosion I missed while I was too busy trying to provide and protect? The silence was heavy. The house felt enormous without her presence, and yet somehow, it also felt more honest. I sat in the kitchen around 2 a.m., nursing my third glass of scotch, and realized I didn't just want her gone. I wanted her erased. Not in a vengeful, destroy everything kind of way, but in a clean-cut, no strings, you get nothing kind of way. That's when I remembered the prenup. We hadn't touched it in years, but I knew what it said. If either party was caught cheating, they walked away with nothing. And nothing is exactly what she was about to get. The morning light made everything look crueler. The stains on the living room rug. Her wine glass, half full, still sitting on the side table. I cleaned it all. Not because I'm neat, but because I couldn't stand the idea of her leaving any mark behind. I even opened the windows, let the August air sweep through the rooms like a reset. Then I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. It's done, I said. I want to file for divorce immediately. Enforce the prenup. He didn't ask for details. He just said, understood, and got to work. By 9 a.m., I was calling a locksmith. By noon, she was locked out of everything. Bank accounts, joint cards, home access. I knew it might seem cold to some, but when someone burns your home down, you don't offer them a blanket. You let them sit in the ashes and feel what they destroyed. She made her choices, and I was finally making mine. I always thought that prenups were for celebrities and rich people, folks who had empires to protect and side pieces to manage. But when we signed ours, it felt like just another formality. Back then, we both had jobs, no kids yet, and enough optimism to believe we'd never need it. I remember her father pushing hard for it, thinking I might be the one to mess up. He was an old-school businessman, all about protecting the family name. But I'd insisted on one specific clause. If either of us cheated, the other kept everything. No negotiations. No sympathy. Just consequences. The irony wasn't lost on me. I sat at my desk, the morning after I kicked her out, opening that drawer where we kept important documents, birth certificates, tax returns, insurance. I thumbed through the folders until I found the manila envelope with our prenup inside. I hadn't looked at it in over a decade. My hands were shaking, not from doubt, but from the weight of what it represented. This wasn't about revenge. This was about reclaiming control. She'd made a choice, and I was about to make mine. That document was my lifeline, the only thing keeping me from being dragged down with her. Reading through the legal language felt like walking through a memory I didn't want anymore. Her signature, still neat and deliberate, sat just beneath mine. I remembered how she laughed nervously that day, said something like, "Let's sign it and forget about it. We'll never need it anyway." I nodded, kissed her forehead, and believed her. I believed in us. Now I was reading it like a war general going over battlefield strategy. The clause was there, bold and crystal clear. In the event of confirmed infidelity, the offending party forfeits all claims to jointly held assets. Simple, brutal, exactly what I needed. By noon, I had my lawyer on the phone. Marcus had been a friend since college, sharp, methodical, and someone who understood the difference between legal boundaries and emotional ones. "Send me the document," he said calmly. "And if you have proof of the infidelity, I'll handle the rest." I told him I had photos. Not many, but enough. Her on top of him, her blouse open, both of them caught off guard. I hadn't taken them out of rage. I took them because something inside me knew that if I didn't, she'd try to spin the story. She always did. While Marcus got to work, I made a second round of calls, this time to our bank, the mortgage company, and my firm's HR department. I wanted everything documented, updated, and untouchable. Our accounts were frozen except for the one solely in my name. Her credit card was canceled. I wasn't just divorcing her. I was dissolving her from my life like a stain you scrub until the fibers shine again. I even took down our wedding photos from the hallway. Not out of spite, but because every time I passed them, I felt like a fool. 16 years of pretending. I wouldn't do it another day. That night, I slept for the first time in 2 days. Not deeply, but enough. It was a cold sleep, dreamless and stiff, but it gave me just enough energy to get through the morning. I woke up to a text from her. Can we talk? No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a lazy request, like this was a disagreement about groceries. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded the message to Marcus. This may be useful if she tries to claim reconciliation later, he said. That hit me hard. How even silence could be weaponized in divorce. Every step had to be calculated now. Every breath measured. I started to wonder when she'd stopped loving me, when that shift happened. Was it during the years I worked overtime to build a life for us? Or when she got that promotion and started spending more time with clients at late dinners? I used to think we were partners. We shared passwords, meals, inside jokes. We had a rhythm. But now I saw the truth. I had been consistent while she had been slowly checking out. And the worst part? She didn't have the decency to be ashamed. Her expression, her tone, her words that day, none of it suggested remorse. Just irritation. Like I'd interrupted something important. The next morning, Marcus called with an update. The divorce is in motion. Given the clause, she'll walk away with nothing unless she challenges the prenup, which would be foolish, considering the photos and the timeline. We'll send a formal notice today. I thanked him, but there was no real satisfaction in my voice. This wasn't a win. It was a cleanup job after a fire. A necessary step, yes, but not something to celebrate. I stared at the empty spot on the wall where our wedding photo used to hang and felt like I'd just torn out a part of myself. Later that day, she showed up at my office building. Security called up to let me know she was in the lobby. She says she just wants to talk for 5 minutes. I told them no. Firmly. She didn't get to dictate the terms anymore. She'd lost that privilege the moment she made a mockery of our marriage on that couch. She texted me again a few minutes later. I deserve a conversation. I deleted it. What she deserved was exactly what she was getting. Distance, silence, and the full weight of her decisions crashing down without me to cushion the blow. The loneliness hit in strange moments. Not in the evenings or during dinner, but in the little things. Folding laundry and realizing half the clothes weren't mine anymore. Waking up and reaching instinctively for someone who wasn't there. I'd been married half my adult life. Undoing that wasn't just legal. It was emotional. Like rewiring a house while it's still standing. I kept thinking about how easily she could have chosen differently. A conversation, a confession, even a request for space. But instead, she chose deception. And now, she was learning that not every lie gets forgiven just because it came wrapped in a familiar face. As I sat down to dinner with Liana that night, just the two of us now, she looked up from her plate and said, "Did you mean it? That she won't get anything?" I nodded. "Not a penny," I said. She didn't smile, but she didn't look sad either. She just nodded back and said, "Good." We didn't say much else after that. We didn't need to. We were two people left behind by someone who never thought they'd be caught. And now, we were learning how to live in the silence she left behind. Liana didn't cry when her mother left. That was the first thing that scared me. I kept waiting for the breakdown, the tantrum, the "why is this happening" moment that movies and parenting books had prepared me for. But instead, she just got quiet. Not angry, not sulking, just eerily, terrifyingly quiet. She moved around the house like a ghost, doing her homework, feeding the dog, brushing her teeth, like muscle memory had taken over. At 15, she'd always been thoughtful, observant. But now, it was like she was trying to disappear. Like if she stayed still enough, she wouldn't have to feel it. I tried to talk to her that first night, sitting at the edge of her bed like I used to when she was little. She was reading, knees pulled to her chest, the same book she'd started 3 times but never finished. "You want to talk?" I asked. She shrugged. Not a no, not a yes, just a shrug, the international symbol for "I'm not ready." I nodded, gave her space, but I couldn't sleep. I lay awake wondering what she was internalizing, what images were burned into her memory. She had been upstairs the day it happened, maybe even heard everything. Or worse, maybe she saw it too. The next morning, she came down dressed for school like nothing had changed. She poured cereal into her bowl and sat at the counter while I packed her lunch. Normally, her mom handled mornings. It used to be a tag team effort, one of us on breakfast, the other on backpacks. But now, it was just me, fumbling through routine while pretending everything was fine. I'm driving you today, I said. She didn't argue, just nodded and kept chewing. The car ride was silent, save for the low hum of the radio. I looked over once at a red light and saw her staring out the window, jaw tight. That Friday, I got a call from her school counselor. Mr. Dalton, she began, Liana's been a little withdrawn this week. Not disruptive, just quiet. Her teachers are concerned. I thanked her, promised to check in. That night, I knocked on Liana's door and asked if she'd go for a walk with me. To my surprise, she agreed. We walked in silence for the first 10 minutes, just circling the block under the amber streetlights. Then, out of nowhere, she said, she tried to talk to me. I stopped mid-step. When? I asked. She shrugged. At school. She showed up in the parking lot. That sent my heart into a tailspin. Did you talk to her? I asked. Not really, she replied. She just kept saying, come with me. You don't need to stay there. We can fix this. My stomach twisted. What did you say? I asked. She kicked at a crack in the sidewalk before answering. I said, you didn't try to fix it when you were with him. Then I walked away. I couldn't breathe for a second. I wanted to pull her in, tell her she didn't have to carry that burden, but she'd already done it. She'd faced the one person who hurt her the most. I didn't tell her how proud I was just then. I figured she didn't need that kind of praise yet. What she needed was safety, stability. I put a hand on her shoulder and said, you don't ever have to go with her, not if you don't want to. But if you ever change your mind, I won't stop you. She looked up at me with those same eyes her mother had, but without the coldness, and said, I don't want to go with someone who lies to me. We didn't speak much after that, but something shifted. She took a deeper breath. She stood a little taller. The weekend passed without incident. I kept things light. Ordered pizza, rented a movie, let her pick. We didn't talk about her mom again, but I could tell she was still carrying it. Sunday night, I walked by her room and heard her crying. Not loud sobs, just quiet, muffled sounds through the blanket. I didn't go in. I just leaned against the wall outside and let her cry in peace. Sometimes, kids need to know they're not being watched while they hurt. It's a different kind of comfort. Like telling them, I'm here, but I won't force you to be okay yet. Monday morning brought another text from her mother. Can I please see her? I miss her. I stared at the screen for a long time before showing it to Liana. I figured she deserved the choice. You don't have to respond, I said. She took the phone, read it, then handed it back. She misses control, she said flatly. Not me. That was when I realized how much my daughter had grown up in just 1 week. Not because she wanted to, but because she'd been forced to. Her innocence had been traded for clarity. It broke me in ways I wasn't ready for. I took the rest of that day off work. I needed space to process, to breathe. I walked through the house thinking about all the lies that must have been told within these walls. How long had she been pretending? How many dinners did we have while she was texting him under the table? I checked our home Wi-Fi history out of paranoia. And there it was, messages, video calls, hotel bookings. Not just once. Months. Possibly longer. I felt physically sick. I threw up in the downstairs bathroom, then sat on the floor, clutching the side of the sink like it was the only thing keeping me from shattering. That night, Liana came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes. She hesitated, then said, I don't need her to say sorry. I just need her to stop acting like she didn't do anything wrong. That one sentence summed up everything I'd been struggling to articulate. It wasn't the betrayal itself that hurt the most. It was the denial of it. The way she tried to twist the narrative, make us feel like we were the ones overreacting. I nodded slowly and said, I know, baby. Me too. And just like that, the silence between us started to dissolve. We began a new routine after that. Shared meals, honest conversations, short walks around the block where we didn't have to say much. Just being present. The house still felt heavy, but it no longer felt hollow. Liana slowly started humming again while brushing her teeth. She laughed at a meme I showed her. Small signs of healing, like green shoots after a storm. Her mother kept texting. I stopped showing the messages. Liana didn't ask anymore. She'd made her decision. And I made mine. We weren't going back. Not to the lie, not to the illusion, not to the woman who traded her family for 5 minutes of stolen attention. There's a version of revenge people fantasize about, loud, cinematic, dramatic. Then there's the quiet kind, the kind that doesn't scream but slices deep and slow. I didn't want fireworks. I wanted silence. I wanted finality. And more than anything, I wanted her to understand that the choices we make echo long after the thrill is gone. She didn't just cheat. She humiliated me in my own home. She wrecked the foundation of our family and expected to walk away with a shrug. So I gave her something real to walk away with: consequences. I wasn't going to raise hell. I was going to close every door behind her, quietly. I knew people, contacts from the last 15 years of building my career. I'd never used those connections to hurt anyone before. But this time, it wasn't about spite. It was about truth. Her boss, his name was Todd Granger, was married, a father of 3, and the golden boy at a firm with deep family values etched into their mission statement. His affair with my wife wasn't just a moral failure. It was a professional one. I made one call to a mutual acquaintance, a former client turned compliance officer, and asked a single question: "Do you want proof, or just the name?" He replied, "Send both." The photos I took weren't graphic, but they were clear. Her straddling him, her hand on his chest, his belt undone. It was enough. I sent the images, along with timestamps and the address. Within 48 hours, Todd was put on administrative leave. Within a week, he was terminated for violations of company policy. His wife filed for divorce a few days later. Word traveled fast. She called me, surprisingly, after she found my number through a mutual connection. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. I thought I was going crazy. I thought it was just me. I told her she wasn't alone. Then I hung up. Next came my wife. She didn't get fired right away. Her position was more complicated, shielded by a different set of internal politics. But that didn't mean I couldn't turn the screws. I contacted every HR department in the industry she worked in, sent anonymous tips with documents, timelines, references. I made sure every hiring manager knew her name was radioactive. It wasn't illegal. It wasn't even aggressive. It was just informative and effective. She called me one night. Her voice panicked. "I can't get anyone to call me back," she said. "Even temp agencies are ignoring my applications." I said, "That's not my problem," and ended the call. I wasn't proud of it, not in the traditional sense. But I didn't feel guilty either. For 16 years, I'd worked late, built a home, supported her dreams while shelving parts of my own. I made sacrifices without keeping score. But when she made her move, she didn't hesitate to torch everything we'd built. And now, I wasn't going to offer her a soft landing. She thought I'd cave. She thought my anger would burn out and I'd fall back into the same role: provider, protector, pushover. But she underestimated how cold I could be once the warmth was gone. Love once fueled me. Now, it was principle. Liana asked about the job fallout eventually. "Did you do something to Mom?" she asked one night while we were washing dishes. I paused, considered how much truth she deserved. "I made sure people knew the truth," I said. "About what happened?" She nodded slowly, then asked, "And her boss?" I didn't lie. Same thing. Liana didn't flinch. She just dried the last plate and placed it carefully in the cabinet. "Good," she said, "because people like that always think they can get away with it." Her words landed heavy, not because of their sharpness, but because of how calm they were, like she was simply stating a fact. After that, the silence from her mother became more desperate. The texts turned from demands to pleas. "Please just talk to me. You're turning her against me. I made a mistake. I didn't deserve to lose everything." But that's the thing about choices. They don't come with a guarantee of grace. You don't get to shatter trust and then dictate the timeline for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Neither did Liana. She had blocked her mother's number after the second time she showed up unannounced at school. We filed a no-contact order after that. It wasn't dramatic, just necessary. She crossed lines, and we drew the boundary in ink. The weight of everything didn't hit me all at once. It came in waves. Some days I felt light, like I'd been freed from a life built on lies. Other days I felt hollow, like I'd been gutted and was still pretending to function. The hardest part wasn't the loss of her. It was the realization that I'd been in love with a version of her that never existed. A mirage. A performance. I grieved more for the illusion than the person. But every day, I woke up, made breakfast for my daughter, went to work, came home, and slowly rebuilt a life that was mine again. One afternoon, I ran into one of her old co-workers at a gas station. He recognized me instantly and asked, "Hey, how's everything going with Jenna?" I didn't respond at first, just stared. Then he shook his head and said, "I heard what happened. Can't believe it. But honestly, I always had a weird feeling about her and Todd. The way they'd sneak off during conferences." He trailed off, maybe realizing he'd said too much. I nodded politely and finished pumping gas. But his words stuck with me. So it wasn't just me. Others had noticed too. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. The final straw came when she showed up outside my workplace with tears and trembling hands. Security intercepted her before she got to my office, but they called me down to confirm whether she should be let in. I walked out to the lobby, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "We're done. You don't get to show up where I work. You lost that right." She tried to argue, her voice cracking, makeup smudged from what I assumed were hours of crying. But I didn't care. I turned around and left her standing there. For the first time, her cries didn't move me. That night, I found an envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no address, just my name in handwriting I knew too well. Inside was a letter, 3 pages, rambling, desperate, apologetic, but only in tone, not in content. It was all about how hard life had become, how unfair it was that one mistake ruined everything. But she still didn't admit the full scope of what she'd done. Still didn't own the impact. I burned the letter in the fire pit in our backyard. Watched it curl, blacken, and vanish. And I felt something settle inside me. Not joy, not satisfaction, just peace. The rain that night was relentless, thick, slanted sheets crashing against the windows like the sky itself was grieving. I stood in the kitchen, rinsing out a mug, when the doorbell rang. It was late, nearly 10, and I wasn't expecting anyone. I peeked through the side window, and there she was. My ex-wife. Drenched. Her once perfect hair was plastered to her face, her coat clinging to her like a second skin. For a moment, I just stood there, staring. Not out of sympathy, out of disbelief. After everything, she had the audacity to come back here, unannounced, uninvited, and soaked in theatrics. I opened the door, not to welcome her in, but because I didn't want her waking up the neighborhood with whatever meltdown she had planned. 5 minutes, I said, voice flat. She stepped inside without a word, dripping onto the entryway tile. Her mascara had streaked, black lines down her cheeks like something out of a B-grade drama. She opened her mouth like she had a speech rehearsed, but all that came out was a shiver. "You're wet," I said plainly, then walked into the kitchen without offering her a towel. I wasn't being cruel. I just wasn't going to play the comforting role anymore. She followed me in, her shoes squelching with every step. "I didn't know where else to go," she said, voice small, broken. I didn't respond. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, waiting. She took a shaky breath. "I lost everything. My job, my reputation, even my apartment. They terminated my lease when I couldn't pay." She paused, searching my face for a flicker of sympathy. I gave her nothing. "Please, just let me see Liana. I'll leave right after. I promise." My jaw tightened. That was the only reason I hadn't slammed the door in her face, because she had invoked our daughter's name. "She's upstairs," I said. "And she doesn't want to see you. I'm not going to force her." Her lip trembled, and for a second, I wondered if the emotion was real. But I remembered too much to be fooled. I remembered her expression when I walked in on her and her boss, blank, irritated, unashamed. I remembered the way she twisted blame, minimized the betrayal, acted like I was the one overreacting. Now she was trying to rewrite the narrative again, hoping pity would do what guilt could not. "You don't understand," she said, voice rising. "I made a mistake. A terrible one. But I'm still her mother. And I'm still her father," I replied, sharp. "The one who didn't lie to her. The one who didn't destroy our home." Her shoulders slumped. She looked so small in that moment, so unlike the confident woman she used to be. I could see the cracks now, the absence of arrogance, the fear in her eyes, the realization that the fallout she thought would pass had rooted itself deep. "Do you want me to beg?" she whispered. "Because I will. I'm sorry, okay? I know I hurt you. I know I hurt her, but I'm still a person. I'm still human. I exhaled slowly. You want to apologize? Fine. But not to me. Go upstairs. Knock. And if she opens the door, you get 5 minutes. If she doesn't, you leave. That's it. You don't get to manipulate her with tears. You don't get to lay guilt on a child you betrayed. She nodded quickly, like a drowning woman handed a rope. I stayed in the kitchen as she climbed the stairs, every creak of the wood under her feet sounding like thunder in my chest. I wanted to follow. I wanted to hear every word. But I stayed rooted, trusting Liana to handle herself. 10 minutes passed before I heard the soft thump of footsteps returning. She walked back down alone, eyes red, lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't say a word to me, just grabbed the doorknob and stepped back into the rain. I closed the door behind her without another glance. It was only later, when I checked on Liana, that I saw the aftermath. She was sitting on her bed, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the floor. Did she say what you needed to hear? I asked gently. She shook her head. She said she misses us, she whispered. But she never said she was sorry. I sat beside her, unsure of what to say. I had hoped, foolishly, maybe, that some part of her mother would rise above and offer something real. An apology, an acknowledgement. But she couldn't even do that. Even at her lowest, she couldn't surrender her pride. You did nothing wrong, I told Liana. And you don't have to carry her guilt. She leaned against me then, just for a moment, and I felt the weight of it all in her silence. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about abandonment, the kind that leaves scars long after the wounds close. The next morning, there was no trace of her. No texts, no calls, no letter. Just quiet. Liana seemed lighter somehow, like the final thread tying her to her mother had been cut. She packed her backpack, ate breakfast without being prompted, and walked out the door with a simple, "See you after school." It was the most normal thing we'd shared in weeks. I stood in the kitchen for a long time afterward, coffee growing cold in my hand, realizing that peace doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in the form of nothing, no begging, no conflict, no chaos. Just absence. That week, I met with Marcus again to finalize the legal details. She's not contesting the divorce, he said. She can't afford to. No job, no backing. And with the clause enforced, she gets nothing. The house, the savings, custody, all yours. I nodded. There was no joy in it, just closure. Like slamming the final page of a book you wish you'd never read. What about contact? I asked. We'll put a restriction in place, he said. She can't show up again without risking legal consequences. That was all I needed. Not vengeance. Not punishment. Just space. Real, legal, permanent space. Later that night, Liana and I ordered Thai takeout and watched a rerun of a show we both liked. Halfway through, she turned to me and said, "Do you think she really loved us? Or just the idea of us?" It was the kind of question that stops your heart. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to break her more than she already was. I think, I said carefully, she loved the version of us that made her life easier, but not the version that asked her to be accountable. Liana nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. And we left it at that. I didn't hear from her again for a long time. No more rain-soaked visits. No letters. No calls. Just silence. And for the first time, I welcomed it. I didn't care where she was, who she was with, or whether she'd found someone else to fool. That wasn't my concern anymore. My focus was on healing, on raising my daughter, on rebuilding the parts of myself that had been quietly breaking long before the affair. Because sometimes the affair is just the final blow. The real cracks run deeper, older, hidden beneath years of denial and sacrifice. That night, I stood on the porch, the storm long past, and watched the wind push through the trees. The house was quiet behind me, Liana already asleep. I breathed deep, finally unafraid of what might come next. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need revenge. I just needed this, the stillness, the clarity, the resolve. She had tried to come back, one last time, and she had failed, not because I slammed the door, but because, deep down, she still couldn't admit what she did. And I'd made peace with never hearing the words. I didn't need them. I already had everything I needed. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into a new kind of normal. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when the silence in the house felt too loud, when the absence left shadows on the walls. But over time, those shadows began to feel less like ghosts and more like reminders of what we'd survived, of what we'd let go. I stopped waking up expecting chaos. I stopped checking my phone for angry messages or manipulative pleas. The quiet wasn't haunting anymore. It was peaceful. And peace, after what we'd been through, was the closest thing to joy I could allow myself to feel. Liana thrived in the quiet, too. She started bringing friends over again, something she hadn't done since the split. I'd hear her laughter drifting from her room, genuine and bright, and it made my chest ache, in a good way. She'd been through more than any child should have to, and yet she carried herself with a maturity that humbled me. There were still days when I saw the hurt in her eyes, small flickers that showed she hadn't forgotten. But she didn't let it define her. She chose to move forward, even if she still carried pieces of the past in her back pocket. I started cooking again, not out of obligation, but because I found comfort in the process. Dicing onions, seasoning meat, setting the table, it grounded me. I remembered how she used to stand behind me in the kitchen, wrapping her arms around my waist, pretending to help just to be close. At first, those memories stung. But over time, they lost their sharpness. They became soft, distant. I could remember without bitterness. Not because I forgave her, because I'd finally let go of needing to understand her. Some people are puzzles that don't come with all the pieces. And some betrayals don't deserve the effort of solving. Financially, things stabilized quickly. Without her draining the accounts or living off my efforts, I found I had more freedom, more control. The prenup had done its job, and Marcus had ensured everything was airtight. There were no appeals, no legal loopholes. She didn't fight it. She couldn't. The woman who once threatened to take everything had walked away with nothing but a damaged reputation and an address no one cared to visit. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But I did allow myself one small luxury. I bought a new leather chair for my office. It was a symbol, not a trophy. Something firm. Something unbreakable. One Saturday afternoon, I found myself standing at the edge of a local soccer field, watching Liana run drills with her team. She'd recently decided to rejoin after quitting the year before, back when the tension at home had made everything feel too heavy. Now she ran like she'd shed something. There was a lightness in her steps, a confidence in her posture. One of the other parents nudged me and said, "She's got heart. You can tell she's had to grow up fast." I smiled politely and nodded, not offering more. They didn't know the half of it. And honestly, they didn't need to. People talked. I know they did. Friends, neighbors, co-workers. They all had their theories, their quiet judgments. Some offered sympathy wrapped in nosiness. Others offered silence wrapped in respect. I chose not to correct anyone. I didn't know the world an explanation. The people who mattered knew the truth. And the people who didn't? Well, their opinions couldn't build or break me anymore. That's the thing about going through fire. You stop fearing the smoke. You stop needing approval. And you start choosing your peace over someone else's comfort. Every single time. A few months later, I bumped into her sister, of all people, at the grocery store. We'd never been close, but we were cordial enough to make small talk. She looked thinner, older, like the family drama had aged her too. "I heard she left town," she said after a long pause. "Tried to start over in Atlanta or something." I nodded, not committing to the conversation. Then she added, "I never thought she'd fall so hard. I mean, I knew she had issues, but I didn't think she'd burn it all down." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We both stood there in that frozen food aisle, letting silence say what words couldn't. Liana and I never had a single healing moment. No breakthrough tears, no dramatic scenes. Just small things. She started hugging me more often, leaning her head on my shoulder during movie nights, asking me to help her with school projects. Little moments that, piece by piece, built a bridge between us. We never stopped talking about her mom, but we didn't obsess over her either. She became a chapter in our story, not the whole book. And that was enough. We weren't trying to erase the past. We were simply refusing to live in it any longer. The first holiday season without her was the hardest. No decorations from the attic, no big dinner plans, no forced family smiles. Just the two of us, a simple meal, and a movie we both liked. At one point, Liana looked over at me and said, "This feels better, calmer." I nodded. "I know," I said. "It's not what we planned, but maybe it's what we needed." She smiled faintly and went back to eating. And in that quiet, I realized something. We had survived the worst of it. The fire had burned, the smoke had cleared, and now all that was left was space. Beautiful, sacred space. Eventually, people stopped asking about her. Time moved on. I stopped checking her social media out of curiosity. I didn't need to know where she was or who she was pretending to be now. That part of my life had ended, clean and clear. The scars remained, sure, but scars don't bleed. They remind. They teach. And mine taught me that love without honesty is just performance. That marriage without respect is a ticking clock. That family, real family, is built on truth, even when the truth hurts. Especially when it does. Now, when I look at my life, I don't see what was taken from me. I see what I protected. I see the daughter who stood beside me when everything fell apart. I see the strength I didn't know I had until I needed it most. I see a man who was lied to, humiliated, and betrayed, and who still stood up the next morning, packed a lunch, and drove his daughter to school. I see a survivor, not of tragedy, but of disappointment, of deception, of love weaponized and then discarded. And I see a man who is still standing, unshaken. If you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal, then you understand the strength it takes to keep going when everything inside you wants to fall apart. This story wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming peace. Have you ever had to walk away from someone who shattered your trust? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your story could be the light someone else needs right now. See you soon in the next story.